Hi, my name is Mark Brown with PonyBoy Pop Art. Today we're going to be looking at how to paint Old King Thor. This model was built by the beast of a designer, David Eastman, and can be found on his Patreon page. You can also find that at eastman.xyz, I believe. And what we're going to do is paint him up today and walk through how we did it. So I hope you have fun and enjoy. So here we have it straight off the printer. This was printed out in Hatchbox Gray and at 0.12 millimeter on the Ender-3. As you can see, the layer lines in here are just almost invisible. I'm actually not going to do any sanding on this at all, other than a little bit of cleanup on some of these little gaps here of small threading and whatnot. I did notice, because I went with such a small infill, I think it was like 2.5% or smaller, that I had a little bit of a fail up here where it just didn't quite give enough support underneath for the cape to go across. So what I'm going to do is grab a little filler putty and fill it into that there, and then do a little bit of quick sanding on just, again, these small pieces and other small areas, and then I'll hit it up with filler primer and we'll go from there. I've got my Liquitex modeling paste here, and this again is great stuff because I can literally just take a little bit on the paintbrush here and paint it in where I want it to be. So grab my model and literally just paint over the hole there. First, I'm just going to glob this on here. And just keep going over it until I filled it in. And now, the nice thing is about this is I take and just slightly wet my brush. Sorry, I've got a little water off camera here. And at that point, we can paint this back to being very smooth. And actually just even rub my finger over it to verify. Yep, actually I can feel a little bit of a accessible sand off there, but that is good, filled in, and ready to be sanded and primed. A side note that should be obvious, but I just wanted to say it. Be sure to really clear your and clean your brush off. Get all that paste back off of there, because you certainly don't want to ruin your brush with some modeling paste deep in there. And then just paint on, anything, basically a paper towel, your hand, whatever, just to make sure that you don't have any stiffness still in the brush itself. So we've got light sanding on those problem areas, and now we're ready to give it a primer. I like to use the Rustoleum 2-in-1 filler Sandable. It just gives a really nice coat. I've heard about another type, more of a putty, I think it is, but it's sprayable, so I've got to check that one out. Again, the only reason I'm really going over this is to give a little extra fill on any layer lines that were in there. And of course, repaint over the white from my filler modeling paste. One technique that I wanted to share with that I've had a couple of people ask online about is I do sanding after the primer, as well as sometimes before the primer. Usually most of the times. This one didn't require much, as we saw. But the thing that people were surprised is honestly doing sanding after the primer. With this Fillable and Sandable primer by Rustoleum, you can usually actually just finger rub a lot of the areas, and as you'll see, it actually gets to a point of being almost glossy smooth, and that is pretty impressive about this primer. But there are going to be some times, like I did notice on this left arm, there was just a little bit of extra feeling of layer line in there, and rubbing my finger didn't do quite enough. So I just took a little piece of sandpaper and gave it a quick polish down. I did this more off camera, but at this point it's nice and smooth. And what happens is that sandable primer, when you use the sandpaper on it or your finger, what you're doing is taking some of the excess and literally moving it into the crevices. So yeah, there is actually a benefit of doing the sanding after the primer. Obviously, if there's big stuff and you're trying to really get major layer lines out, you want to do that beforehand. But with this, I was really pretty happy with it as it was. So I think we are about ready to paint it up. What I've done is found a reference image, which I'm about to share. So what we're going to do now is get it taped up so that we can get a majority of this painted based on the reference image. All of this is steel, this is steel, this is steel, this bracer is steel, this is steel, this is steel, and his whole head is steel. So we're going to tape everything except that and hit her up. So I'm starting to get this taped up. One thing I wanted to share, a couple of tips. Actually, one, remember to look at it from all angles. You never know how and what angle you're going to end up hitting this with spray paint. So you don't want any gaps here where the paint can get up under. So you want to get that tucked in nice and tight. And basically remember that this, since we're going to hit it with spray paint, this can go pretty much anywhere. Now's not the time to be chintzy. Tape is cheap. Make sure that you've taped up everything. So obviously I've only gotten started. I still need to do all the rest of his face and a whole bunch more here, but I've been going over getting his hair and his beard and anything else that was coming down, and I've got a lot of work to do on the cape on the back here. There's been times in the past that I've said, I'm not going to be getting this particular area, I'm not even going to be spraying near there, I won't tape it down. And that's about the time that you end up grabbing it with spray paint covered fingers and getting paint over areas that you didn't want. So again, don't be cheap, just layer the heck out of it with tape and make sure that there's nothing seen, as you'll see in a minute. So here we have him all taped up. Again, we're just wanting to look and verify. I'm not too worried about some of these under areas because they're going to be heavily weathered up and turned black, even though this is officially something that would be silver anyways. It's just an example of an area that I'm not really that concerned with. But the concept here is if it's showing, it's going to be silver, and we want to make sure that we've got it taped and ready for that point. I think we are. So I'm going to grab my trusty metallic Rustoleum and give her a couple of quick passes and start to see how it comes out. One thing that you might notice is in the reference image, it looked like this area down here was still all silver, but I also noticed that it was really a different pattern on the print, so I'm thinking, yeah, then maybe that's not the same material. So I'm going to make it heavily weathered leather,
in that area with the silver buttons. And the reason I'm saying this is to point out that don't knock yourself if it doesn't seem like it's perfect. Go with what you think you want, because you're the artist in this case. And as they say, you have the artist interpretation. And my interpretation is that down area should be leather. Yep, my early coats weren't getting that very well, so I'm just hitting this up because I really want this to be shiny. Try to be careful not to touch too much the areas that are spray painted. Yep, there we go. Really fill in. One of the nice things about this metallic is that it is kind of like a gloss paint. The more you paint over, the more it'll actually gloss up. So now, pretty much thinking that is good. Yep, those little areas on top. Don't know if you can see those. There was a little bit of layer line showing through, so hitting that up to just fill in those lines a little with the gloss. And now we're going to wait. I know some of you are going to be impatient and be like, yeah, I want to see what it looks like right now. Don't. If you peel the paint or the tape off right now, it will very likely go great, and also very likely get paint all over your fingers or your gloves if you're wearing them. And at that point, you're most likely going to touch an area that you didn't want to touch. So just put a timer on, give yourself about 10-15 minutes, come back and touch some of the tape. If you see that you're getting silver on your fingers or it feels wet still, walk away, give it another 5 to 10 minutes, and come back when it's all dry. And as you can see, this is why I really like taking a large area and hitting it first, is because you can immediately get that gratification of you're making progress. Just look at this guy. So there was a couple little areas here where my tape wasn't really solid down and I got some bleed. That's okay. We're going to be turning that area into leather and going over it with some opaque acrylic. And I have a couple little spots in his hair, but again, I'll be going over those with acrylics. But overall, I think we did pretty good on keeping it taped and only getting the silver areas silver. So now that I've got this, I actually want to take a moment and spray this down with some enamel. Oddly enough, I'm going to be hitting it with matte enamel, because even though this is glossed up, I'm going to be doing more painting on this in general, and the gloss enamel is a little harder to paint on. So I'm going to spray it down with matte, and at that point that will lock in the silver, and then I'll start going over the cloth on the back. And I want to be careful, so I'm going to test this out here. Yep, hits on the back there, and I can see it's wet, so it's locking that in, but also not causing any sheen or concerns of that sort. So I'm going to go ahead and spray down his head to get that helmet locked in, and same with his arms and his bands. And again, the reason I'm doing this is I really want to be able to go over the silver with weathering. I'm also going to be painting all around it, and I don't want to mess it up, so having this enamel gives us the ability to go back over, and when we're painting, just use water and wipe away whatever mistakes we make and not have it ruin the existing finish. So we're going to set a 20-minute timer and let this go and come back. Alright, I have some honey brown, that acrylic paint that we're going to be using, and what I'm doing is getting some water and really thinning it out. We're almost going to make this an acrylic wash, and what we're doing is wanting to make sure that the some of these layer lines that we've kind of not worried about actually show through, because it's going to help give a texture feel to the old cloth. And basically just giving this a full wash over. Now, one of the reasons that I am doing this very thin is because, again, I do want some of that textured feel to come through. And matter of fact, I got a little more texture than I wanted there from the modeling paste, but that's okay. Again, we will be hitting that up with weathering later on, so it won't be too terrible. But if your acrylic paint is relatively thick, it will go over and fill in a lot of those lines to some degree. I mean, not terribly. You're not going to be able to get away from sanding. But again, in this case, we're actually using that to our benefit, because it's going to give more of that textured feel that this is cloth after all, and relatively old cloth, not silk. So, we want this to have a little bit of feel to it. So as you recall, we sprayed this down with matte before we got going, and one of the reasons is because, like here, I've accidentally grabbed it with my fingers, had some paint on there. So just take a little water, put on a paper towel, and Viola. We can wipe that right off, and don't have to worry about repainting it with silver now. While we're still working with the browns, I decided to grab a darker brown here and mix it up a little bit. And what we're going to do is get this leather part down here. So as a matter of fact, I'll just go ahead and start painting that now. I really want to grab a different brush because I've already just mucked up by overpainting. Should have realized this is a little bit different. Oh, no, I didn't muck up because I wanted this all to be brown. Look at that. As they say, a happy little accident, right? Okay. Really should have used a little smaller brush, but I'm getting just a little bit lazy. Alright, let's wash off the brush. Grab a paper towel. Wipe off some of that errant brown. And some of that there. Okay. We're going to let him dry, probably about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to spray him up with matte enamel again to lock all these colors in. And while we've got the big brush out, we've still got his arms to do, so pulled out the flesh tone. And we'll go ahead and start getting his arms covered in that. Oh, a little more watery than I wanted, so we'll just spread that around some and then come back and... Alright, I pulled out my smaller brush and did his, painted his face since I had the flesh still out, and I've still got to do some touch-ups on his arms. But I wanted to share a couple of things. First and foremost, another big shout out to David Eastman, the designer of this model. He is an amazing artist, and he was really, really thoughtful on this one. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but the eyes are an absolute bitch to paint sometimes, and he's given us a nice bare squink of an eye, so we're not going to have any issues painting this, I don't think. The other is what you'll notice is not only did I do his flesh, the flesh colored, but also his eyebrows and his little bit of his beard near his chin and all of his mustache. Wanted to share with that the reasoning for doing that is to consider when you're painting hair. One of the biggest things about hair is you really want multiple layers of different colors to really kind of give that natural feel to it. So one of the things also is just to know that hair is translucent, so you are going to see just a little bit of the flesh color behind there. So I went ahead and made sure that there was some of that flesh color in the hair, and then when I'm painting up the hair itself with the other blonde colors, then if I miss some areas, then it's okay, because some of that flesh will still show through, and it'll give that feeling that it really is kind of seeing a little bit of the skin underneath, or at least the skin tone. So other than, again, some touch-ups here on his skin, I think we are about ready to lock this down and then do the hair. Another technique I wanted to share was to bounce around between different styles of brushes. So you'll see that I'm touching up right now with this one, which is kind of a really fine and open, or not open, but a soft pattern. And the reason I'm using that one is because I don't want there to be brush strokes on the acrylic. It's interesting, I was talking to my wife about art in general, and she was noting the different type of brush strokes that are used by different artists, and how that actually shows the type of artist they are, or tells character about them. And it's funny to me because these types of paintings, when you're painting a figure, you don't want to see any brush strokes. If you do, well, it ruins the illusion. It's clear that there was a brush there, as versus on skin, there's no brush, there's just your skin. So any times that you see that clearly you had brush strokes left, go back over it, maybe going in the other direction, or varying your way, or I also like to give just a very light rubbing, like just a very light and quick. It will oftentimes give that spread out bit without actually having left any brush stroke on there. If there's a little bit of variation, that's okay. Again, your skin's not perfect, there's some variation, so that's good. And I think we are ready to lock him down now, and we'll go from there. Now, this is definitely starting to look a little more like the God of Thunder, but we need to still get this locked down. So I'm just going to come over with our matte enamel and really just focusing on the areas that we just painted, because I don't really need to rematte everything. We'll go pretty decent on the back of his cape here. We are going to be weathering that up pretty well. And on his arms to get that skin covered. A little bit more on his face. Okay, I think we're good. We're going to let that sit for 20 minutes and dry. So we're starting on the hair now, and I'm going to do several layers. The point with hair is we really want a lot of different colors to be coming through, so it really does give a multi-tone effect to it. I'm going to be starting out with Candlelight, which is just a kind of an off yellow, and it's going to give us a nice base for our blonde in here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. Probably a little thick there, so let's thin that out and get it in a place where you can see. And we'll start just filling this in. And this is going to be kind of long and tedious, so I'm going to pause and come back in a minute. Alright, and this is where we've got at this point. We've got a nice coating of this Candlelight on all of his hair. I've got to wipe some of this down that's bled over onto his cape on the back, because we're about to spray this again with Matte Enamel. Reason is we are going to be coming back over and using this Light Buttermilk to give a more of a white cast to some of the hair. And we don't want, since these are both water-based, we don't want them to be blending at all. We really want two distinct colors and layers. So we're going to spray the matte enamel once I've got all these cleaned off, because we don't want to lock them in as they are. And the other thing I wanted to point out is you will notice there's a little bit of gray still peeking through on some of it. It wasn't a full coat of the, a complete coat of the Candlelight. And I'm actually okay with that because, again, we want this multiple color for the depth of it. And that's already giving a little extra gray and deepness to the hair. So I think that's really going to help out. Alright, I have now got some light buttermilk here, and we're going to just do a really light amount of washing on this. And again, I want this really thin, not to the point of watery, but enough that when we go over this, we're only going to be leaving hints of white in there. I'm hoping that you can see that. And basically we're just going to kind of go over random areas like that to kind of bring in some of those white highlights and give that multi-depth to his hair, so that you'll still see the candle, you'll still see some of the flesh underneath, you may even see some of the gray, and you'll start to see some of this light buttermilk as well. Alright, I'm going to take this over, spray it down again with matte enamel and give it a few minutes, and then we're going to come back and give one more coat of pure white to really give some highlights in here. But other than that, I think we're just about done with his hair. We've got to touch up and finally do his eye patch there, and then I think we're ready to start weathering this and make this look real. That's my favorite part. So what I've got now is some just titanium white acrylic, and I've thinned it out pretty well. Not entirely thin like the other ones, but a little bit thin. What I'm looking to do is to highlight some of these strands, just lightly hitting some of them to kind of give those extra little bits of sheen. So I've got a really stiff brush because I'm not looking to fill in the cracks. I'm literally looking to just kind of glide over so that it catches some of those highlights. Alright, I think I'm getting ready to lock him down and get another coat of matte on him. What I've done here at the very end was just take little bits of both the candlelight and/or the bone and/or the white, and just grab what was ever on my brush and find any areas that still had a little too much gray showing through, and just kind of spreading it around, and at that point it all kind of evens out and it looks like just different layers are hitting in different areas. And some are a little more white than others, some are a little more yellow than others, and that's pretty much how actual hair is going to be. It's not going to be uniform. It's going to be kind of all over the place. So some will be lighter, some will be darker. Again, wanting to try and keep the pure white on the very tips, but that's not a hard and fast rule. I think Pirates of the Caribbean said it best. It's more of a guideline than a rule. So just take it like that. So I'm going to finish this up and take it over and lock her down. So the last bit before we weather this guy is to paint his eye patch here, and what I'm going to do is mix up a color I like to call Galaxy Black. I don't know if that's the actual color here, but basically what I do is take some iron oxide that's got the metal flakes in there, and as you can see, it's got a kind of a little fleckle. It's got a lot of flecks in it, and what I'm going to do is just take a little carbon black. I've got way more than I need here, and mix it into the iron oxide, and basically we just want to keep going until that turns really dark, which you see it does, and it doesn't take much black to do it, but also it still has all those little metal flakes in them. So it really kind of gives like a metallic black, but almost gives the feel of the galaxy concept because of the little flecks of stars in there, so to speak. So I'm just going to take that and go over his eye patch area here. Am I catching that on screen? No, I'm not. Let's try that again. Going over his eye patch area there. And I'm going to take this off camera so I can get a better angle, but you get the concept. Alright, usually I would start with weathering this guy up with oils, but I wanted to say, you know, I've got this galaxy black that I've made up here. What if I really thinned it out with water and then used that as part of my aging? And so what I've done is thinned it out a lot, and I'm just gonna start painting it over the silver, but I'm gonna paint it deeply into the cracks. And also spread it out a lot. And am I getting here? Let me get where I can see a little better, and you can see me a little better. So I'm gonna keep grabbing that, taking it off of some of the areas that I want to be more shiny. We'll make them shiny more later. And just spreading that out. Now, one nice thing, if we're not really thrilled with the look of this, which I'm not real thrilled, but it's kind of a step in the right direction. Let's see what happens if we wipe some of this off. Okay, now it's kind of seeping into the cracks. So it's definitely giving us more of a feel of age as versus this stuff, which gives us a feel of plastic. So yeah, let's just keep going with that, right? So I had run out of the my thinned out Galaxy Black, so since I'm making a little more, I wanted to show you. So I'm just spreading this out, grabbing just a little bit of black, mix it in there, turns pretty quickly. Then most importantly is once I've got it to about the right coloring, is to then reach over, grab some water with my brush, and bring it back here and mix it in. And then I'm gonna get everything off my brush there, reach over, grab some more water, and bring it back in. And basically we want this really, really watery so that it goes on extremely thin, wipes off easy, and really most importantly just seeps down into those cracks. A little bit there. And as usual, right about here, shout out to Joe Brancic over at Likeness 3D. He is the one that helped me master any and all of my techniques here. So thank you, Joe. And so, as I noted before, just kind of spreading this around, and then gonna wipe some of the excess off, but we're gonna really basically make sure that it gets into all the crevices, so that really helps give that dirtied up appeal and look and feel to it. And then just a quick wipe here just to say, yep, that's the concept that we're looking for. And this is how we're looking at this point. I've made sure to get that Galaxy Black wash down deep into the crevices and especially in any cracks. We're going to be going back over this again with some black oil as well to do some additional dirtying up, but I really wanted to hit that, and I was really happy with the way that came out. Truthfully, that was an experiment. I've never done a wash with this Galaxy Black before, but again, it just seemed like the right thing to do to add to his flat gray, silver or flat gray steel that was coming out. So on that experimenting concept, I know that I wanted to have his cape be different than his breastplate down there. Didn't mean to tap that. So I'm actually going to wash both of these up with that same Galaxy Black wash and see how they do. It should give a lot more real world feel to this very plastic brown looking cape, and ditto to his breastplate here. So let's just see how it goes. I think I'll take that. So yep, we'll just keep going like that. Make sure it gets everywhere. Even on the top there. And then we'll just do a nice little gentle wipe. Now it's definitely a more realistic feel, but we've still got some of the glittering of the metal flake in there, so it's gonna, I think it's gonna give a cool effect to this. We're still again gonna be oiling that down with black oil and probably some burnt umber as well, because I just can't stop myself with burnt umber for doing weathering effects. But for now, let's just do a quick test and see. Yep, I think this is gonna be nice for the cape too, so I'm just gonna turn off the camera and not bore you, but go and repeat this process over his whole cape. So wanted to share on the cape here. As you'll see, I'm going very heavy on the paint here, and then just taking and wiping a lot of the excess off. And what's happening is it gives us varying levels of color and depth in there, as well as some of the shine of the metal flake. So really giving a already started a more real world feel to this stuff, and will continue as we give more of the aging onto it. Okay, so this is where we've got Thor at this point. I think I'm going to take it over and lock in everything, and then we will continue on the weathering, but we'll be switching over to the oils at this point. But I would say we've got some good progress going on here. Do have a little bit of an issue here that I'd spilled over some acrylic, but as you're going to find out once we get to the oil weathering, we're going to make that disappear. You'd never even know. So I wanted to give Thor a little bit more of a solid base here. So I've got this nice plaque that I picked up at Michael's back when they were open for I think like $1, and thrown some 5-minute epoxy on there, mixed it up well, and now I'm just sliding this guy right as much center as I can get him, and all right, I'm gonna clean off any of the excess. Just so we don't have any bumps and that type of thing on the plaque itself. Alright, we're going to let this set for 5 minutes, and then this whole thing will be one solid piece, and we will paint it up and get it ready for being a worthy base for Thor. Okay, while we wait for our base to finish getting dried and solidifying, I've pulled out literally the last bits of burnt umber that I can get. This is burnt umber and oil, and I've put it onto one of my oil palettes. As I've noted in my other videos, there are two types of palettes that I use, one for acrylic, one for oil, and both of them I get for free. The acrylic ones I get whenever I get takeout from a restaurant. They end up giving me a plastic thing to be able to put my food in, or at least most of them do. Some of them have switched over to paper. And for my oils, I constantly get high glossy thick paper stock that is perfect because it doesn't absorb any of the oil, and I'm able to make a complete mess out of it, and I don't care because I'm just going to throw it away afterwards, or sorry, recycle it. So what I'm doing here is mixing up some burnt umber to throw it on and dry brush it. I'm going to, now that I've got it on there pretty well, get most of it back off of my brush. I've just used that paper towel to do that. And basically what I'm looking for is when I'm starting to get leaving some but not a lot of burnt umber on, that's kind of the magic spot. And we'll start back somewhere that's not easily seen and just kind of test it out. And yep, that's what I was hoping for. So it looks a little thick at the moment. Don't worry, just spread it out. And keep spreading it on. And once you've got it pretty much everywhere that you wanted, go back over and wipe some but not all of it off. And what you see is that vein just immediately pops right out. The other ripples on his muscle will start to pop out, and also some of the bits that we didn't want up on top are going to start to hide and fade away, and it gives him a nice tan. So, you know, wins all around, right? So and again, if you don't like it too much, just wipe some of it off. It comes off pretty easily since we did the matte lockdown. And that arm compared to that arm, let's keep going with this, right? Okay, and I will put you on pause as I do that. All right, I have done his other arm here, and as well as his face. I don't know how well you can see on the face, but I basically covered over all of it and then just wiped down the high cheekbones so that, or the high cheek areas, so that it left a little depth down into the shadows. Sorry, didn't mean to brown nose you there, Thor. All right, and ditto the same over there. So it's just give him a lot more shape to and definition to him. Same with his muscles down here. I went really heavy on them and then just rubbed down really heavy as well. What happened is in deep crevices, it's still left there, and then some of the highlights, it's all cleared off, so it gives those multiple definitions than the shadows and highlights that your eyes are looking for, and a lot less plastic feel at that point. So actually I'm going to continue this and add burnt umber on all of the leather and probably some of his cape, and then we'll see about locking that all down and switch over to black. So actually the wash of the Galaxy Black did a really good job on this. I'm just kind of going in and anywhere that seems overly light or maybe a little overly ironed, and just adding a little more of this brown to pull that back out. And definitely into the creases and that type of thing, because we definitely would just want to keep getting as much color and darkness into the shadows as possible. We don't want anything like the original light honey brown to be showing as is when it's in a crack, crevice, or shadow, because that's just not realistic. It should be darker, and if it's not, your eye will not be tricked anymore and the illusion gets broken. And that is the whole point of this, is to keep the illusion up. Give your eye and your brain enough things that seem natural, that they just feel like it's natural. And that trick of that is that if your eye sees too much of the same thing, it can know that it's flat and patterned. And in reality, that never happens. As Jurassic Park will tell you, even the pores of your skin have slight differences, and those differences are giving you at least some visual cues that there's something not completely smooth or flat about it. And so that's what we're trying to do here, is also help give that illusion that there's nothing flat or smooth about this. There's always something a little different everywhere that you look. So we're going to go ahead and lock this down and then switch over and go with the black oil. We're getting pretty close on this, I'd say. So what I'm going to do now is take some black oil and just get a little bit here, and just like we did before, we're going to be going over and adding this as a weathering. And what I'm wanting to do is focus on all the cracks and deep shadow areas that I think really just need a little more attention. And then we're gonna basically dirty those up with this black here and make sure that I don't have a lot more of the burnt umber still on my paintbrush, which it looks like it does. That's unfortunate. So what I'm doing now is taking this black oil-based paint, which I don't know if you can see there, and just doing like we did before, of getting just a little bit on, and really more dry brushing than anything, of just going over any of the cracks and crevices that we didn't feel like they were dark enough, and help get this feel in there. Again, don't worry if it's a little too thick, we can wipe it back out, but we certainly want to get any of those lines and areas that should be shadowed and force them to be shadowed. And then again, we can just pull that out if we want. And look at there, now it's just dirty. All right, still a little too much. Wipe that down. And now it's got some nice shading in there. All right, I'm going to continue along doing this and hit some more black on this. I decided I wanted to give a real world, an old world look to the base here, so I'm going to do a two-part. I'm going to take the base that was part of his mount and spray paint that silver, and then we'll age that up a little bit. And then I'm going to take some of this stone and use it for the actual plaque itself, to give a feeling like this is a steel mount on an old stone plaque. And I think that'll look pretty cool. The reason I did the black originally is both for helping the silver have a nice base under it, but also more importantly is for the stone. That stone additive really needs something under it, otherwise a lot of the wood will still show through. So just give a quick pass on that. So now we'll do a quick pass on this. You're probably thinking, didn't you want to tape that down on the silver? In retrospect, maybe. I was hoping that this would kind of splatter up just a little bit and make it look like it was being encompassed. But I don't know if that's really what's happening. Oh well. This is where it's going to be, and we will keep adding to it. I'm going to throw a roll of this other stone on there, and then go from there. Trust me, I think it's going to work out okay. Alright, so the last thing I want to talk about is reference images. You should definitely check them and check them often, especially if you have one in mind that you're going off of. And if you have any color deficiencies like I do, maybe get someone to check it for you and double check that you've got everything understood well. So for instance, my son was really impressed with how Thor was coming along today, and but he did have just one question, which was, why was his cape brown and not red? I'm like, huh. Showed him the reference image, and he's like, yeah, that's red, Dad. So I'm like, oh, yeah, my red-green color blindness just kicked in a little bit there. So what I've got is crimson oil, and I'm just giving his whole cape a wash. As you can see, this is what I've done so far, and it's still keeping all of the variations, the multi-tones, the depth, but it's now actually got more of a red hue to it, which is important. So we're just about done there, and I'm going to wrap this up, and then we will give it one more satin coat, and I think Thor is going to be ready to be done. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the wrap-up. And there we go, Old King Thor. And hoping that you guys were able to create something similar. And as always, please send me a message and show me how your print came out, your paint job, and your piece all together. And also, of course, send a message over to David Eastman and at Eastman3D and let him know how it came out and how you like his model. Until next time, I hope you enjoy and have a great time. Stay safe out there.